Super mind stretchers. It's got a charm to it.
Let's get curious.
Oh, that's a good way to start.
Curious.
We should start like that. We just did.
I want to get curious.
Let's get super curious. Let me hear you educate. And explorate. Explorate's not
That's
a word.
good. Explorate is a good word.
Explorate. There was a 98 Degrees album. Was it 98 Degrees? And the album was Imaginate.
Oh, okay.
Was it 98 Degrees? It might have been another boy band.
Boy band. I was going to ask.
in the
I was just
90s.
nodding along like,
And I can remember seeing Imaginate, and it
That's what
like
their fans
kind of like tied my brain in knots because I was looking at it going, that's a
Imaginate.
word. No, it's not.
Imagine it.
That's Imaginate. That's a. And it took me a while before I could. It was a word it's not a word, but it was so almost a word.
Well, I
that
like
I could-
Brendan. We were on a mutual group chat where someone messaged through the word superbly
Superbly. That's great.
or Super Bowl.
I don't
guess.
remember that. What was that?
like
Was-
hyperbole,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, oh,
superbole.
that's right. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I do
Hyperbole.
remember that.
Super Bowl.
It's like
And then-
superbly.
Hyperbole.
Yeah.
Superbole.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then I said, "Who won the hyper bowl?" and it was just when somebody had won
The election had
the-
just
yeah.
happened. Yeah.
And
So they said Labour.
Yeah, said Labour. That was silly. Oh dear.
And people always exaggerate how much they won by in the hyperbole.
They
Hyperbole.
do.
I couldn't
Um,
even say it. I could like picture it in
yeah,
my head
yeah.
as I was trying to
Yeah,
say it, and I
yeah,
said it the
yeah.
wrong way.
It's a
Ooh,
tricky joke to make.
Are you someone who can picture things? There's this like a aphantasia
Yeah.
sort of I don't know
Yeah.
if condition's the right word, where there are people who can or cannot picture
Yeah.
something when you say, think of this thing,
Yeah.
like as a visual image in their brain rather than just the
Yeah.
fact of it amorphous.
So I'm
Yeah.
definitely, I think of the visual thing, and it's so hard for me to imagine not being able to do or not doing that.
Yeah. Having a
what's it-
mind's eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
and
when you read a book, are you hearing it kind of as you're reading it, or like
hearing, I don't know. Maybe.
or hearing maybe is the wrong word, but like
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I
I'm
always
definitely-
assume that when someone read something, they're kind of evoking it. But then when I tried to say hyperbole, I saw the word
Yeah.
hyperbole in my
Yeah, and-
mind, and my mind's eye read the word.
And
literally.
there's you spent
sounds
so
very-
much time like trying to make sure you don't, if I'm projecting here, but
Oh, yeah, no, that's
making sure I don't
very accurate.
say like as I'm reading. That was one of my biggest fears if I was reading to the class or something, like seeing Cokes and saying coax or saying
yeah.
because that's
You start.
I think
the
that was
word.
reasonable because I liked hooking up TVs when I was younger. So all the
Absolutely.
coaxial cable, and then you see it and you say coax. So if you say coax, and what was the
that was
the
such
other
a
one?
cruel thing, wasn't it? Getting
Yeah.
the class to read one paragraph at a time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're counting the paragraphs and you're counting the seats next to you and you're thinking, I'm going to get the big one.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
I
like,
was
I'm gonna
once
get
reading
short
the
paragraph.
notices in homeroom one morning, and there was an announcement that the MS readathon, like the readathon that raised money for multiple sclerosis
That's right.
research, but it just said MS, and they hadn't capitalized both or something, and so I said the Miss Readathon or the Ms. Readathon.
Because
Right.
you'd always be
like-
seeing Ms.
Oh, the Ms.
as
Ms.
a
Yeah,
teacher's
yeah,
name or
yeah.
something in school.
Yeah, and oh
That's
man,
fair.
the time that it took my class to forget about that. All I wanted to do in high school was fly under the radar. I wasn't cool. I wasn't really
You got a
dorky.
crush on Miss Readathon?
I wasn't it's all coming back to me, guys. I wasn't the dorkiest of the dorks, but I certainly was lower rung. All I wanted to do was melt into the background. But no. And then I did something like that.
Oh, I certainly did a few of them in school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think in school especially I would just read I'm not sure what part of school, but I would just read the words as they came in. And so to answer your question, Ben, about whether I paint a picture as I read a book, I think that really depends on how I'm concentrating. I think I can just read through words and
Mhm.
let it sort of slide through my brain without visualizing, and I can still probably take in the facts or like have a gist of what I'm reading. But then if I really concentrate, I can paint the picture. I think I read slower then. But I think if there was the pressure of reading in front of a class or something like that, I think I'm reading word by word. It's I'd be very prone to.
Yeah.
I reckon that was the problem for me as well. I'd
was.
just be reading. I could read a whole paragraph and then not know anything that I just read because you're just concentrating on not messing up.
Yeah.
They mustn't do that anymore.
I actually find I love reading and I love knowledge, but I like that with YouTube and everything, I feel like the world and technology has finally caught up to my way of naturally learning, because I actually find reading really exhausting for that reason. Like I'll read and maybe it's an undiagnosed thing, but I just find
reading
it,
out loud to yourself, like don't want to embarrass yourself in front of yourself by saying the word wrong.
Yeah. No, it's more like did I take that in? And it's like it's sort of like some weird FOMO, and I'm like, hold on, no. I can't really say I've read the book if I didn't absorb that bit, and then I read that paragraph over and over, and then my brain will just get distracted so easily, and then I realize like I'm half a page in and I didn't really absorb, so I have to go back, and then by the time I just find it exhausting, and so I'm not actually a big reader. I kind of wish I was, but audiobooks I find are really good because like in my car, I listen to them sometimes at work, and you've got the forward and back buttons, and they do the 15 seconds forward, 15 seconds back, or whatever it is. Yeah. And so I'll be like just listening, and then it's easy enough to just go, oh hold on, I missed it, and back I go, and so I had this discussion with my brother about if you get to the end of an audiobook, can you say, oh, I read this book? I think. Like, because it doesn't help anybody to go, I read Paul Kelly's, well, actually, I didn't read it. I listened to the audiobook. Like, nobody cares.
But that's the only way you could say it, isn't it? Because it's too awkward to say, I listened to the audiobook of. Yeah, and you can't say, I listened to the book.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you misspoke.
I try to get around it by saying, well, actually, Paul Kelly talks about this in his book. And it's like, so you don't go, well, I read this book, but in this book, they talk about, or I can't think of another example, but in Good Omens they do this, like, even though I did read Good Omens,
but that's it, isn't it? I think reading is overrated, like in the sense of, and I say that as a writer and as an academic and as a person who's meant to be a proponent of it. I think that like the idea of like, oh well,
say that bit about being a writer again. You loved saying that.
Well, I just drop it in there.
You dropped the because I know.
Just do the plug.
I know that you're always worried that you're going to say, and I thought it was cute how you dropped the volume,
especially because it's like, but that's why I think I can say that it's overrated. You see, because you need people who have got a bit of this in their like job description or something to actually say, no, you don't have to like. Reading is not everything, and if you're getting it from an audiobook, or if you're getting it, if you're dyslexic, or if you're consuming things that are not in your first language and all this kind of stuff, then reading's maybe not the best.
I heard they did studies where it's like this, it fires off the same like things in your brain. I don't know if that's true, but I certainly latched onto it because I liked it. I liked hearing it.
That's how I research as well. I absorb anything that confirms anything that I already want to feel.
It's the way
makes me
forward.
feel good.
It's the way we do it now.
I just block it out.
It's called the affirmation bias.
Yeah, that's right. But I do like I have to read things like 10 times, and I like will read over something and realize I was thinking about something else. Yeah, I know, right? Or more likely, I don't read at all because when I try to,
that's me.
Yeah, but I am going for my ADHD psych evaluation on this week on Wednesday. So in theory, I think it's only the first of like 2, so maybe I won't have the answer. I'm pretty certain I'm already diagnosed with ADHD. Yeah, is that like cows mooing in the background? Pretty sure there is a digital photo frame.
Oh, right, that every now and then plays a video.
And I cannot figure out if it's going to pick up on these mics or not, or if we're just going to sound like madmen going like, was that a cow? And they're like, where do these guys record this podcast?
we should DI it and get it right so we can bring the level up a bit.
Because I could hear white noise before, and I'm pretty sure it was just a footage of like waterfalls in the background.
I was getting sleepy.
So when you read waterfalls, can you hear the waterfalls?
I told you about. I don't know if I could tell this. I guess I could tell. We could always cut it if I can. But like, so I used to work at NIDA. See, I didn't go quiet then.
Yeah.
Come back.
Still going. And it is literally livestock. It is just. I'm like, what is this like barring and mooing and. So Tom has had to run across the room for the second time to try and
just
unplug this thing.
Quell this.
He's unplugged it.
He's unplugged it.
The battery backups has kicked in.
Got louder. Okay, we're back.
While we're at it, because there's also a clock ticking in the background. I don't know if it's ever going to just like come through, and it's just so part of my brain. All right, where were we? NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Art, where, you know, famous people like Kate Blanchett and who else? That's it. She's it. She's the only one who went to. Mel Gibson and, you know, studied there. Yeah, I know, right? Scandal noted. He wasn't there when I was there. Yeah. But when I was teaching there, and so, you know, it's a lovely place and lovely people, but it's, you know, the national, it's got all this prestige and stuff. And they built this whole graduate wing and spent all this money on it. But then, of course, one of the things they do there is film. Like you teach, that's why I was there, is like teaching film to the acting students and stuff. And they are trying to record in studios. But one of the things when you're recording is trying to get good audio. And so we keep hearing, what's the air conditioner? Okay, so you got to turn off all the fridges and things, turn off the air conditioners and stuff like that. So we get a nice clean sound. And there's still just this and they're going, so the air conditioning obviously doesn't isolate. It's not in a central. Okay, so they disconnected the entire air conditioning for the whole building so they could like isolate that. Great. Went in, was trying to record again. Still, that is really weird. Like, it must be like there must be like mains water or something running through. So they're like shutting off the water as well. It's like, and then they're like, they just cannot figure it out. So they go back to the architect, who goes back to like the building engineers and people. And finally they get through to someone who comes in. And they're like, they go up into the roof or into the ceiling cavities inside these studios, and they pull down. Oh, that's right, because they switched the power off as well.
Oh my goodness.
They disconnected the power at one point, and it's still this like, and they found all these little battery operated white noise generators just in the ceilings. And they went back to the engineers, and they're like, yeah, because there was this research paper that said that, like, you know, total silence is bad for like creativity and for the brain. So we've put in these, like, it's, you know, part of the design of like a creative space is to have this like constant white noise in the background. And it must have cost them so much money trying to figure out how to remove these white noise generators.
That's amazing.
That's hilarious.
That's such a well-meaning pathway to go down, but you like put that in the documents or something, or like let people know. I don't know. I'll add a the fact that you had to go so much research to find out what was going on.
I'll add a big blanket allegedly to every part of that, just to cover myself, not to be sued by
that's amazing,
or the arts ministry, or the engineers, or the architects, or any of those kind of.
That's such a thing that would happen to you.
What was your face at that point? Just like.
Speaking of my face, it was like this.
Whoa, mustachioed.
That's quite a face.
We've gone a while. No comment at all.
Oh,
looking fantastic.
You're behind the mic.
I cannot blame you though.
Oh yeah,
the tash is pretty blonde on my face, which really fades into invisibility if you're not, you know.
Yeah, carefully. I dig it.
We'll give it the Curiosity Show treatment. So we got here. Definitely a lighter blondie. What's the shape of this moustache? It goes just a bit below the edges of the lips.
I reckon there would be a era of Dean Hutton that would have something very similar to that.
Made my day. Obviously different, you know, inverted colors, but have you ever seen me with a moustache?
I don't know about just a moustache.
No.
Definitely with beard.
No, never just a moustache.
Has anyone ever seen me with just a moustache?
I don't think so. The listeners certainly
it's definitely a different
haven't.
look.
Or aren't now.
I'm biased from growing up with you, but so it's hard for me to separate my picture of you over all the years that I've known you. But I just get a little bit of Gary Oldman with this look. You've got
I can
dark
see
green
it.
glasses on as well. So that
when he have a moustache. When he's Commissioner Gordon, maybe.
Yeah, he's got a bit of a moustache going on for Commissioner Gordon, I reckon. He's such a chameleon, though, that if you have a look, you could say. You could just say Gary
someone looks like Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
You could be insulting them. You could be complimenting them. You could just be,
You've got it's got an 80s look as well. Is
yeah,
what
right.
is it?
Because if I was being charitable to myself, I wouldn't mind getting it close to like a goose from
yep.
Yes.
We already spoke about
that's what that is.
ER on this show.
Mm-hmm.
But Goose, he played Mark, one of the main characters.
Was he on ER as well?
Yeah. Unless I'm sorely mistaken, but I'm sure that's him.
Yeah. Long line of storied mustaches, and then Rooster's got like did he inherit the mustache in Top Gun Maverick?
Oh,
maybe.
yeah.
As well, the son of Goose.
Yeah, that's how you know it's him. That's how you know.
You've definitely got that look. It's a good look. It's looking cool.
Thank you. If I was being uncharitable, then it's probably not quite as much as that.
They should have They missed a trick not casting Ryan Gosling in that, didn't they? I only just thought of that then. I missed the trick.
The Goose and the Gosling. Yeah, I mean, if only for that. If only for the real name.
That joke must have been made somewhere. It must have been. You can't leave that on the table.
Yeah, Gosling is a baby goose. Is that right?
Yeah.
Because a gander is the female.
The gander's the male.
Oh, so the goose is the sure. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Is what's good for men is good for women.
And I wonder if Goose is the female name or Goose is just the animal, and whether the female goose has another name that I'm not sure about. Because what then
Ms.
is...
Goose, like Ms. Readathon.
Yeah, like Ms. Readathon. Yeah. But it's funny, you're going back to you saying was it aphasia or aphantasia?
Aphantasia, yeah.
Yeah. I heard a bloke on the radio talking about having that once and finding out that he did, because he was just living his life as normal, not knowing that it was any different.
Right.
And then he was like an adult by the time that he started hearing people talk about picturing people.
Right.
And he's like, what? And he started looking into it and think, you mean that if I tell you to think of someone, you can just picture their face.
There's like a
in
little
your brain.
movie in your brain. Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I can just because when he looked at people, he recognized it was them and he knew it was them, but he couldn't imagine people. And he was like really annoyed. He just thought, you're telling me that you can just think of loved ones and you can just like imagine their faces, and they're like, yeah, and he's like, oh man,
must sound like a magic power.
Yeah, he actually got really upset that he's like, I would love to be able to think of my wife or my kids or my mum or my dad and just be able to.
There must be like lines in movies and poems and things where they're referring to that, like, and I'll close my eyes and think of your face, and people are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
think of your face.
Yeah,
but they must have a concept of the person they're thinking of. So is it like for that? See, we need someone with aphantasia as a guest on the show to talk to this idea of like, if you think about your loved one, then is it just the concept of them, like the kind of ethereal and memories of events? But then again, you wouldn't be picturing the event. I find it very hard to formulate what this.
There is
like.
Someone in our loose circles who we know who has this condition. I won't name them, but they might listen to this. I'm not sure. So shout out to you, Mr. Aphantasia. We'll say it's a man. But when we did some quizzing because he was very open to questions about this.
Yeah, okay.
And it sounded, this is my interpretation of what he was saying, was that he can bring to mind the facts of someone. So if you say picture someone like say it's their partner or a kid or something like that, they can bring to mind the fact that they have blonde hair and blue eyes or something like that. Like they can bring to mind that as almost like a series of facts, maybe all at the same time. But there's no picture associated with it. And so we started probing this to be like, oh, well, can we test this in a way? It's a bit cruel if someone was uncomfortable with this, but this person was very comfortable with this sort of exploration of the idea. And so I don't know what's out there in the literature. I did no research into this, so there's probably a whole lot of established things already. But I thought, what about, if we said to someone, picture a tree, something where there could be a bunch of different options for it. It's not like a loved one or a specific person that you can bring to mind facts. You say, think of a tree, and then you got that person to draw the tree that they were thinking of. Yeah. So, because there is a way for that person to think of a tree. But I think we sort of broke down at this point where it was like, is just sort of bridging that little gap between what it is that they're thinking of and the facts of a particular tree they're thinking of. and whether they needed to link it to a specific tree, or if they could just decide on a particular tree type and then draw something that matched the tree that they were thinking.
Wonder if anyone's ever had like a head injury and switched from one like to the other to
Right,
like
that would
not
be
being
interesting.
able to picture things to being able to picture or
yeah.
To be able
versa.
to bridge the gap and describe the difference.
and whether it
Yeah.
would just suddenly be this crazy thing of like your whole mind shifting and changing.
This friend and I and our guests of that night started coming up with ideas for some sort of fiction that would be fun. What sort of character would be interesting to have aphantasia?
Yeah.
And so we came up with a police sketch artist with aphantasia. So they're just hearing facts, but not picturing something themselves. And in our version, they were terrible at sketching. Or a good drawer, but just terrible.
It's funny that you
that's
say
not
that
what I said at all.
Because as you were saying that, I was thinking of that scene in what is it? Is it Rogue Nation where like he's in the like, Ethan
Mission Impossible,
Hunt is in the car and he's just like, you're an analyst, and he meets
Jeremy
that
Renner,
must be Ghost Protocol because he meets Jeremy
Bloody Mission
Renner in that
Impossible
one
podcast.
and then he draws a picture on his hand. Like,
in like
he
2
saw
seconds.
this guy for like a split second on a camera screen or something like half an hour ago, and he just like does a sketch on his hand and holds it out, and who's that? You know.
And then was it
And
later
Tom
in
Cruise had to study
Crude
and
drawing,
learn.
but I think it could be.
Tom Cruise spent 4 weeks locked in a shipping container just learning how to like do that.
Yeah.
He did that himself.
Yeah, he taught himself to have aphantasia so that he could.
Was it later in that film or another film where Ving Rhames' character is looking at 2 different sketches that Ethan Hunt has drawn?
Yeah.
And he just on the fly without Ethan being there says he cares about her because of the
he
way
doesn't
that he
know
draws
this person
Yeah.
very well, but this woman, what do you say? He knows her.
it. Ridiculous.
So this has got to be different to the thing of people not being able to. The other one is people not being able to hear voices. I was going to say hear voices in there. Isn't it crazy that some people don't hear voices in there, guys? Isn't it? They don't think it's crazy. I think it's good. No, but like hear, like I guess
the internal monologue.
Yeah,
is that,
like to think in words is probably
Yeah.
a better way to say that. Like so that. And that comes back to the reading thing. There's some people like, do people hear the words in their mind's ear, I guess you'd call it. And then if you were, I don't know, a common one is like reliving a conversation or imagining a conversation with someone and thinking about the things you would say or they would say, or remembering a conversation. And then I think there is a lot of people that don't have that. And that's like a very like common one, apparently. So that it's common enough that there is a large population of people out there who are unaware of the other side of that going, what? You can, when you read words, you hear them. And then that makes me think, what do those people think when they're watching a movie that's got voiceover of the person's voice talking? Like, what is this disembodied voice that's just talking about what this character is
they
like?
Think of it as narration. Or,
maybe. Yeah,
that's a good question. Because I definitely have strong internal monologue, but in terms of thinking in that string of words, I think for me that's a little bit like breathing or something where you can control it consciously. If you're, as soon as you start thinking about it, it's a conscious thing that I'm like, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, or blinking. Yeah.
But it's still doing everything it needs to do without as much form and conscious form if you're not bringing it from
exactly.
the mind.
Yeah. I think that for me, that's how
I think that's the same with
that.
me. I also talking about like the reading and the even though reading the book has more I guess more prestige than listening to the audiobook. I have listened to Paul Kelly's audiobook multiple times, and there's definitely something about hearing it in his voice. Yeah. And it does kind of like inform the way that I read it now because of his cadence. But I'm like, people might say, oh, it's better to read the book than hear somebody's interpretation of it. But because it was his memoir being read by
and autobiographies are pretty special when you hear them in the voice of the person.
That sort of narrowing element is narrowed in a way that I don't think I would improve upon if I want to get what they're trying to say. Like, it's better to hear them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I like how that connects to last week's episode, which I think made it in, where we were talking about technologies, and Ben, you were talking about people being afraid of writing.
I was just thinking that Socrates, his head would explode if we told him about audiobooks.
But then it's like being given the chance to defend it. You can do a secondary level of...
True. You can run it through AI.
Yeah.
Do you reckon Bill and Ted showed him some books on tape? Because they wouldn't have had like Audible back then.
True.
But they could have. Oh well, I had a time machine. Maybe they went forward and showed him like the. But you know, they only had him for the day. I think
Bill and Ted had one of my
San Dimas is always running.
My favorite uses of time travel, where they just kept on kind of going. All right, we've got a time machine, so just. When we need the key for this door, we'll just come back and put the key here, and they just find it, and it's like,
and they just like
sense.
once they discover that gag, they just like do it ad nauseum till the end, and it's so good.
It's like we got to remember a trash can. What? And then a trash can just falls on the guy's head. It's like, how could you have said that?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, it's just to tie a few of these things together. Like so, you're saying about AI, talking about like sort of conscious and unconscious thought patterns and things like that. So I had a funny one the other day. I've done this come up a few times. I've found online people make a rock paper scissors simulator that you can play.
Okay.
So it just comes up on in your browser, and you just pick rock paper or scissors, and the computer picks its version. And the idea behind it is varied, but the idea is that it tries to learn your patterns. And you know, at the first it might lose, or you might have roughly 1/3 win, 1/3 draw, 1/3 loss, as would be expected. But then over time, it starts beating you more and more often. It'll start beating you like 50% or 60% of the time. But that's interesting because it's taking into account what your last go was.
Yeah.
And so I always take this as a personal challenge. So I took that personally. And I'm always like, all right, I'm going to, because this brings in, you know, can you be random? Like people are not as good at being random as they think they are. If you tell someone to just put random dots on a piece of paper, they're going to struggle to make it random.
Which used to be the only way to beat chess computers, was to make weird random mistakes or moves, because that was what the chess computers couldn't necessarily counter for, I guess,
because they're being trained on all these logical moves and everything. So with this rock paper scissors, this was a great example for me. So I tried a bunch of different versions, and it would be keeping track of the score as well, so I could look at the stats and everything. And so I tried one lot where I just blank-mindedly clicked around and tried to be random, but without trying any tricks or anything. I just like vaguely thought to try and be random. And sure enough, it did what it sort of promised, and then it started beating me. So then I was like, all right, I'm going to do 100 games now where I'm going to go fast. So I can't just, you know, it's not just leaving it totally to chance, leaving the computer and coming back. But I'm going to really concentrate on trying not to be predictable for whatever that meant in my brain at that time.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I was able to keep it at 1/3. Like I won 1/3 of the time. And then I was like, okay, now I'm going to mix the two. I'm going to start like that and just click and be very conscious about what patterns and what things I'm doing, and taking into account all the information, what I did last and what the computer is doing and what I think it thinks I'm doing and all that sort of stuff. And I'd do that for a bit, and I could keep it at 1/3, and then I would let my brain wander, and I'd watch the stats change, and it would start beating me, and then I'd start concentrating again, and I'd bring it back.
That's interesting.
And I found this really interesting, and it's like obviously a pretty small sample size.
Yeah.
But I was like, is this what we're going to have to do in the future, when like now they've got these AI things that can read our brain patterns to try and see what we're thinking? Like, we're going to have to.
I wonder if you said there's multiple ones out there, have you tried like having two going at the same time and like inserting just completely not connected, inserting the moves from one end to the other, and see how long it takes it to realize that.
Or I was wondering whether it would detect, like, if you took pi and then it was, you know, you divided up the digits into like rocks for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or something like that.
I wonder if it would recognize that, because it can just check everything and just try anything at breakneck speed. Because
it's not like is it a chat bot, or you can't ask it questions?
No, this was just like you click on one of the options. But I've seen various.
So I wonder if you've got a chat bot to be watching your game with you, whether the chatbot could explain to you after like 1,000 games, this is what it's figured out about you, or something like that. This is because if it's changing the probability, there must be a pattern.
Yep.
But is that pattern just so black box that even the AI itself wouldn't be able to find the language to kind of articulate what it thinks it's doing?
I'd seen some working on using Markov chains, which I think are a weak-ish version of trying to guess what the next token or the next thing is going to be
don't know
in a
what
chain.
markup chains
No,
is,
and I
I
don't
mean.
know it well enough to
Okay.
explain it either, unfortunately. But it's sort of this idea of just, picking up patterns and being able to then guess the next thing.
I always thought as a kid, like code breaking and stuff. I was just like, well, I could just make it more complicated. Like, and if the old thing where you pick the common letters and whatnot. I'm like, well, I'll just make it like harder and just do another cipher on top of that. And then it was like, I just realized that like that's the point. Like, there's nothing you can do that someone couldn't try and undo. Like,
that blew my mind.
I'm sure just add another level, and then it would just seem to be random, but you could find it. Like, there's like anything you can do. There's nothing stopping anyone from trying that thing if they try hard enough for long enough.
I ended up having to order in some uranium and like hooking it up to the computer just to beat this freaking rock paper scissors part.
Good.
Now Amazon just keeps on trying to invite you to order more uranium. It's just like, you must like uranium.
I'm getting these weird
It's
lumps
funny in terms of like when you said like, is that just what we're gonna have to do in future? I kind of like have I'm uneducated, but a little bit of a wariness or fear of AI, and I think that a bunch of my friends like will send me like stupid made up AI memes, just like this like absolute garbage comedy, like doesn't make any sense, and I just think that's actually in my brain a really important thing to do. Just send meaningless AI garbage to your friends and laugh at it so that it spreads the word of what's possible.
Right.
Because if you're not exposed to how good it is, then you might fall for something that could be dangerous. And so I kind of like the idea of spreading meaningless, harmless stuff. Because now I feel like, if they can make that, they can fool me. But I know that's not real because that's a guy coming out of a picnic blanket to eat a sandwich that's made of ants or something. Like it's like it's nonsense and harmless. But now it's like, that looks really good.
Yeah.
So now that I've had my
vaccine.
I've had my vaccine. I've had my fortress of skepticism built up. Then I might be a bit safer, and it happened in a stupid, funny way.
Well, one of the defenses they talk about is like polluting the data sets and stuff. So
Yeah.
just kind of, spamming like wherever these data sets are going to kind of draw from with, garbage and misinformation. So there's all this noise. But then if it's random, you'll actually extract something really, salient from it.
Yeah.
I asked AI while we were chatting to explain to me like I'm 5 years old what a Markov chain is.
Nice.
I'm saying, all right, kiddo.
Well, it really took that literally.
I love that.
Imagine you're playing a simple game with your toy robot. The robot can only do 3 things: jump, spin, sit down. And it's got a little emoji next to each of them. The jump one is a frog. The spin one is just the rotational like icon, and sit down is a chair. Every time you press the button on the robot, it randomly picks what to do next. But here's the fun part. What it picks depends only on what it just did, not what it did before that. So if the robot just jumped, it might be 70% likely to spin next, 20% likely to jump again, and 10% likely to sit down. And if it was spinning, maybe it's more likely to jump next instead. That's a Markov chain. It's like a robot that makes choices one after the other, but each choice only depends on the last thing it did, not the whole history. Just like a silly dance with rules that say, if I just spun, I might jump next. Fun and random.
You went Alan Partridge there, and I loved it. I might jump next. Just like kind of hand it up a little bit.
Thanks, Pops.
That's my data set's just been trained on Alan Partridge. So
Nice.
if I try to be random, it'll just come out like that.
Yeah.
I think I get that. I posted on Instagram, on the Super Mind Stretchers Instagram, my attempt at getting AI to explain the magic knife trick from last week.
Yeah.
Because I was still kind of thinking, I still don't get. And so if you haven't listened to last week's episode, very roughly, it's a knife can cut a sheet of newspaper, but you put that newspaper on a potato and then push the knife through the paper to the potato. It'll cut the potato, but the newspaper won't get sliced or cut. And then randomly, I was watching and I should have remembered what this YouTuber was. It just popped up on the algorithm for me. And it was, I think they're Dutch, these YouTubers. And this guy was talking about trying to answer the question why guillotine blades are slanted.
Okay.
Have you seen this?
That's
You know about this?
good
Okay, so
question. Yeah.
I'd like to know.
it wouldn't be hard to find again, but we'll find. I'll give credit to this YouTube channel, but that was the question. Was like all the historical versions and all the images we've got of like French guillotines and from the Revolution and stuff. They're at an angle, and they're like, well, why does that make for better chopping or cutting?
Yeah.
Does that make it more efficient? And so they built a full size guillotine, and they created a variety of different blades. So they created like the angled one, and they measured, and they found most of the ones in museums and storage were about 45-degree angles.
Okay.
So they made a 45-degree angle one. They made just a horizontal one, just a straight kind of flat chopping angle. They made a pointed one, so like one that's like the base, like the point of a triangle at the bottom, so that it would just contact the neck or whatever at a single point. So it's sort of 45-degree angles and 45-degree angles.
Yeah.
A better way to say what that is, like a chevron shape or something.
Yeah.
Like coming down.
Yep.
And then one which I forget the name of, but it is the curve, which is the perfect curve that determines. All right, let me see if I can explain this.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a ramp and you put a ball and you rolled a ball down a 45-degree ramp, it would travel at a certain time.
Or
what is it?
I think it's the brachistochrone.
Oh, that doesn't sound familiar, but that's a
or
cool
the
word.
or
but,
isochronous curve.
okay, so is that the curve that would give you the optimal speed? Like the ball, if a ball rolls down this curve shape, it will beat the ball that rolls down at a 45-degree angle, or a ball that goes straight down.
I can't remember
vertically
if
to a
it's
curve.
if it's the fastest.
Okay,
but it is. I think it might be, but it is the one where if you placed a rolling ball or item on any point of that curve, it would reach the bottom at the same time.
Okay.
And
That's slightly different then. Yeah.
Hence isochronous, same time.
Okay. This one had like a short name, and I want to say it started with like a B or something. But,
Right.
So I presume it was named after a person,
Right.
rather than like a Latin or Greek
It's
word.
I know the isochronous one is a segment of the curve described by if you have a ball or a rolling wheel, and like if you marked the top of a car tire and drew the curve that it makes as if it were drawing on a piece of card as the wheel drove it would kind of go, and then for a moment at the bottom it's actually stationary, and then that's the
okay.
Yeah, I can picture that.
Yeah.
All right.
But I do know the one you're talking about, Ben. Yes.
So the reason they made
fastest
that one
speed.
was because they said that a 45-degree angle guillotine blade perhaps is essentially doing a slicing motion. So instead of just chopping, it's the same as if you were dragging a knife across a surface, which has the added effect of putting pressure outwardly, like forcing the two sides of what you're cutting outwards from the blade. And so they tested all these different ones. They tested it with katana mats, which was kind of cool. They like rolled up these katana mats that are used in like katana testing, katana training, and then they did all these tests, and it ended up being, I think, the chevron one was the most effective.
Sure. And when you mentioned it, I thought that might be.
Yeah.
Because, it would be like a point, and then it's like,
and you get the outward cutting both directions.
My intuition tells me that if you had it just horizontal, then it would dull sooner. This is horror to think about, but it was like, whereas because like pushing down a knife, pushing down on something, like if
Potatoes.
I'm cutting like potatoes, for instance, if I'm cutting like over time, I'd often try to do a slicing motion, like intuitively would try and do a slicing motion to get, especially with a blunter knife, to get a more effective cut, to minimize. And so I feel like an angled would kind of simulate that more than straight across.
I suspect that's what it was. This was probably, I think they're going to do a follow-up because they didn't quite get to a satisfying answer in the end. But that was what they were hinting at, was that the angled blade, I think, was just slicing. Katana mats are like a very different texture to what they were cutting in the revolutions with these guillotines. And so I imagine there was something to the fact that it had to have that slicing motion. But the bit that struck me was in just a little throwaway comment in amongst it all. He goes, now, as we know, cutting is really just, oh, by the way, this is all, I'm pretty sure, Dutch, or I don't know where they're from.
Right.
So the whole channel is him explaining things like this. The guillotine blade is at an angle at 45 degrees. But he's like, oh, well, as we know, cutting is really just a spectrum from cracking to squishing.
Right.
And so sometimes you really, like, if you get down to the atomic level, like, all you're doing is squishing or cracking. And squishing is just like compressing atoms together, and then until they get like smooshed apart from each other.
That's
like if you're pushing a knife through butter, the butter doesn't crack. It's just
yeah.
or like it just kind of
Some ends
pushes.
up on one
being
side and some ends up on the
squished
other.
and
It just pushes some of the matter on each side of the
Yeah,
passing blade.
sure.
And cracking is where you start smooshing to the point where there's enough pressure and stress that then the matter below the blade splits in a catastrophic kind of fracture,
Interesting.
and it might split all the way through, or it might split and then the crack might deviate. But as the knife or the cutting tool continues to move down, it starts a new crack.
Yeah.
It starts squishing and then cracking and then squishing and then cracking until it gets to the bottom of the matter. And they just said any cutting is just, it was such a quick throwaway. Everyone knows that
by the
cutting
way,
is just
as we know,
a spectrum from cracking to squishing. But that just opened my mind up to be oh, okay.
As we know, this one thing that's just blown everything wide open, that's this whole new concept.
And there's that thing of like,
to me.
I just, in my head, the word cut or whatever meant something, but actually when you break it down to what it's doing to the
squishing or
matter,
cracking. Yeah,
it's
a
just
spectrum.
something. It
That's really
started to
interesting.
clarify things, and I was like, so does that go some way? Because AI was telling me the newspaper was being squished when there is a potato underneath it,
Yeah.
rather than being forced apart
Right.
by a blade.
Yeah.
Whereas the potato then is cracking under
Yeah. I think we touched on that a little last week when we were talking about the I suspected it was more nuanced than how he was describing it in the small segment that he had. And a raw potato, like, there's a certain amount of cracking in my brain, like to me, like, because I feel like, and that cracking would then happen almost like ahead of the blade, and then the blade is just pushing the pushing apart the parts that will then cause the crack to
widen. That's right.
To widen
So
downward.
the sides of the blade are actually pushing outwards rather than the point of the blade doing more smooshing
And I think that's
more pressure.
what made me think of the possible effectiveness of, like, though morbid to think about, a guillotine blade that, if I've got this right, it's kind of like a right angled triangle, but the hypotenuse is at the top, the horizontal.
Yes.
Kind of like, so that it would be 90 degrees.
Yeah,
at
that's
a
a better
40
way to
foot.
say it. Yeah.
And like, it's kind of like, if it's coming, like, I think totally horizontal, then it's all, then there's a higher degree of, or the squish is all like kind of like directed
I guess
downward.
So, yeah.
And then if it were 45 degrees, the whole blade, you're kind of like having a squish, a X component of the squish and a Y component of the squish, maybe, or just or it's just kind of like acting at different. And then I feel like if there's an outward force, if it really is squish, then
by the way, the horizontal,
squash.
the flat blade was almost as effective.
Oh, almost as effective
So
as
I forgot to say that. Bit.
Interesting.
So it wasn't necessarily that a horizontal blade is way less effective than an angled blade. They were almost identical.
Okay.
But I think you're right. I think there would be and I actually think there's something to what you're saying about where it would wear down or get blunted.
Yeah.
And something to do with the fact that functionally, a vertical drop of an angled blade is doing physically the same thing as dragging a knife across the surface and doing a slicing motion rather than a chopping motion. I think that was where it was going to come down to.
Yeah, and if the point were in the center, then I feel like it's doing a little bit of slicing, but from the middle outward and kind of spreading the load one way, that way, and that way. So it kind of like
point, I think, just puts an immense amount of pressure. Like it just focuses all the pressure. And as long as the cutting tool is more dense and tougher in terms of physical toughness than what you're trying to chop.
Well, that's what it made me think as well, is like how well fixed the item is and whether it will roll side to side, because I could imagine something big enough with enough squish throughout it that a point could end up just getting lodged somewhere, because if it's going directly down, it'll just like kind of nestle in whatever it's like going into if it's too big a thing. Whereas possibly if it's well fixed and you've got an angled blade, the sideways motion might kick in more effectively than the sideways motion going like being halved to go in both directions. So I'd be curious about like how that
would be
because
interesting.
You fix someone's head, you know.
I was so proud we got through that whole thing without using the words flesh or decapitation or beheading. Bloody entrails or
yeah. I was thinking of melons the whole time. That's what I had in my mind's eye.
Yeah.
Anyway. I always start like talking about my intuition, and then I get in trouble because people say you don't know, you didn't see it, because I just like I kind of me talking about my intuition is often the same as like it sounds a bit like, oh no, but actually like I'm mansplaining, but I promise I was just talking through my intuition.
We're all mansplainers.
We're all mansplainers. That's what super mansplainers.
Super mansplainers. I love it. It's a segment.
Yeah.
Should we watch a clip?
I absolutely think we should. I'll just finish by saying that when I did that little Dutch accent, it reminded me of one of my favorite moments flying back into Adelaide and driving back from Adelaide Airport and switching on the radio in the car that was preset to Radio Adelaide, which is a show that we used to have our radio show on.
That's right, Ben.
And there's a delightful lady, and I hope she's still on the air, who had a late night show, and she was the music came on first, and it was like a doo-wop, like, you know, kind of old fashioned music. I was like, oh, this is great doo-wop music. And then it came on, and she's like, and that was from Stephen and the doo-wop trio, and we welcome to the show, and this is the show where we talk about the what is the doo-wop. in the show, in the what is the doo-wop, we talk about, we play the music, and is the music a doo-wop or is it not the doo-wop? And that is what we will be discussing tonight. And the whole show is in that voice, just discussing what made a song doo-wop and what wasn't doo-wop, and what elements made it doo-wop.
Is it doo-wop?
Is it doo-wop?
Doo-wop or don't wop?
But you're right, enough about last week's clips, because it is not Super Mansplainers, it is Super Mind Stretches.
Super Mind Stretches.
The podcast where we look at clips of The Curiosity Show, which was a classic Australian science show from the 1970s, 80s, and 1990, hosted by me, Ben Crisp.
And me, Tom Crisp.
And me, Brendan Williams.
It's getting smoother and smoother. Now, I'm noticing on The Curiosity Show YouTube channel, they do have some playlists, and I don't know if we've played anything from this playlist, which is Tricks, Puzzles, and Games.
Oh, boy.
Caught my eye. Puzzle Ship Sailing Around the Earth. Is this ringing bells?
I like
Brenny
this one.
Dubs?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Here we go. Any guesses, Tom? Now, famously, Brendan knows these clips back to front because even if he hadn't seen them recently, Brendan's memory is a steel trap.
Well,
I've probably seen all of these and would still not remember even as I'm watching them again. And you haven't really seen probably any of these.
Virtually none.
So
what was it called again?
Puzzle Ship Sailing Around the Earth.
Ship sailing around
and it's
the
under Tricks,
Earth.
Puzzles, and Games. So this could be a trick. It could be a puzzle. Could be a game. This is a puzzle, though.
I feel like geography is probably not the flavor of what this puzzle would be about in terms of how do you get a ship to go in a straight line around
maybe.
the world?
Maybe.
But because I like those pictures of maps where you can draw a straight line. It's like as the crow flies, it won't look kind of straight if you're thinking about a sphere.
Yeah.
So I can imagine it being that. What else could it be? You have any ideas, Ben?
Let's find out.
He's trying it on his friends.
I was going to say that, but I couldn't make it work.
Yeah. So good. And the VHS kind
These
of
are all different.
Oh.
flutter.
Stock footage of a ship. Cruise ship.
The Queen Elizabeth II, QE2, one of the largest passenger boats ever built. And here's a model of it. Now, it's actually a converted toy tugboat, right? But there's a problem concerning the QE2. Let's imagine that it leaves from the nearest harbour and sails all the way around the world and back to the same harbour. Which part of the boat, Rob, which part of the boat will travel furthest? The front, the back, or some other part?
Well, that's silly. I mean, the front will leave before the back, but it'll get back there before the back as well. So,
all right, awesome setup. And they're posing us a question that we can now debate as well.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
Quick little style. It's hard to tell at this point. When was a QE2 actually? Does a QE2 still sail though? Is that a?
It's the first I've heard of it.
It's a great question.
Tell me.
I'm going to go maybe 80s. And just to flip things up, Dean has got the open collar shirt this time. Rob's, got the brown cardigan over the brown fat striped collared shirt.
Yeah.
Dean looks like he's ready to get on a boat.
He does.
For vacation.
And there was a subtle moment there, but I just love Rob's little
Right.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Like he's just kind of a little bit annoyed that Dean's bringing this up now. Like,
Yes, I see the towboat.
So the question is, what
Okay.
part of the ship? So it sails around the world.
Okay.
It goes back. It returns to the same harbor that it left from.
Okay.
But when ships leave port, they go. Do they leave front forward? And then when they
Depends on
come
the-
back in, do they
okay.
back in or do they
Yeah.
come in front first?
Well,
Because
Brendan knows more about
sport.
boats than we do. Can you answer that part of
do
the
you
question?
back it? Like they're talking about a cruise ship, aren't they?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's different for different ships.
Sure.
Would a cruise ship ever back itself in? Surely not.
I think it depends on the port.
Mm.
It's like there are some ports where you just have to make do. Like it's like how do you park a car? It's like depends on.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, but
and-
you know the answer to this puzzle, don't you? So
I think
are you
I do.
trying to? Okay,
I
so
think I do. But I think they ask 2 questions if I remember
oh,
right.
okay.
Well, just with this question, because I feel like with this sort of question, the fact that the boat's going around the world you can discount most of the trip because
Right.
all the bits of the boat are going most
Yes.
of the way. So we're really only thinking about the
When it
start, the
leaves and when it
finish.
ends,
Yeah. So what you're getting at, Ben, is the
I'm trying to-
direction, the way it leaves. So if it kind of like not swivels, but sort of if you imagine the back of the boat staying still, say, or the front of the boat staying still, and the back sort of sliding out.
Well,
the back
because
has moved more.
a
than the
giant
front at
cruise
that
ship, I guess,
point.
has to be like side on to a coast or a dock. But if it's at like a berth, like it's going to come in front in. Is what I'm saying make any sense? You and I are not the sailors here. Brendan is the sailor. He does go sailing.
Aye.
So I'm going to say that it has to change direction at one end of the trip. And so it's going to be like, all right, I'll just throw something out there. What about it leaves front first?
Okay.
And so the whole trip, front and back, have traveled the same distance until it gets all the
Yep.
way back to the
Yep.
same berth again. But then it has to, I'm going to say it's like a U shape, like a horseshoe harbor, and it has to turn around to back in so that
Okay.
it is in the same orientation to which it left, which would still have traveled the same distance, wouldn't it?
I'm going to imagine.
Unless it pivots around the front, and then the front wouldn't have moved as far as the back.
All right, I'll take that.
So I'll
as
say
your
back.
answer.
I'll say the back has traveled the furthest.
Okay. I think I cannot get my head enough around the question of what it means for a different part of the boat to move different distance. So I'm going to imagine, in my mind's eye, that the boat is wiggling the whole way it's going, and the back is staying very still because that's where the what are they called, the turbines, whatever those things are called, and the front I'm imagining is just like bouncing up and down and up and down. So it's like traveling a lot in the up and down direction. It's swiveling side to side. So I'm going to say that the front is
has traveled
the
further.
most.
Okay,
I've added some pizzazz to this journey
liked
that they
it.
didn't add, but that's my answer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the turbines were always the thing that would get you on like underwater levels of like Mario
Yeah,
64
yeah.
and things like
Banjo-Kazooie,
that. Banjo
Yeah,
Kazooie
it's
as well.
Last Crusade.
Rusty Bucket.
But
Baby.
the underwater music is always the most calming. I just put on some of the
Oh, boy.
underwater music
Boom.
from those games.
Boom, boom, da 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 dum, 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 dum. Yeah.
So they go the same distance, but at different times.
Yes, but which part of the boat is highest?
Well, the top of the funnel.
Watch the tip of the funnel as the QE2 circumnavigates the Earth. Here it is. Leaves the harbour, goes all the way around, and the tip of the funnel is
So the
making
top
a
of the boat
line
has
just
gone
with the
further.
rest of
The top and the bottom. I was thinking
in front and back, yeah.
I see
That
what
was
you
out
mean.
bad.
Yes, I suppose it does. Well, on that basis, there's a part of the boat that goes even further.
Really? I wonder what part that is.
And they've left that one open.
Oh, so we don't get the answer.
No, I don't think
wait.
we get the. Oh, maybe we do.
Do we want to
Or
think
is this
that?
a different segment? Or just some glorious
And I
footage?
finished-
More of an ad for the QE2.
The QE2 sailing around the world, and when it does so, the tip of the funnel goes further than most other parts of the boat. But Rob, you say there's another part of the boat that goes even further than the tip of the funnel?
Well, I think there is. Have a look at this.
Should we think about this?
The QE2 is driven by propellers or screws, and of course they spin.
That was going to be
So
my
as they're
guess.
spinning,
that's-
they
I
drive it
I
forward.
couldn't remember if that
And
was
for
the
every
second
metre
question
that
they
the boat
asked.
goes, the tip of the propeller must go a lot further. So for my money, it's the tip of the propeller that goes the greatest distance.
Of course. And that's all for this week's show.
Whoa,
Well, that wasn't me. That was a very
that was just a
very strange
switched-
audio change at the
switched
end there.
audio there.
I think they've gone to one of these places that used to do all the like digitizing, I reckon, of
Yep.
VHSs and stuff. And there's just that little
Just that right at the
moment
end there.
there.
Yes, I think the trick with the turbine and my initial struggle with the question was if I got this question on a test, it would really depend on what what the subject of this test was. Because if it's like a mathematics test where you get the like two vehicles are traveling away from each other this distance, I think purely in the maths of the distances and that sort of thing. Whereas this is a little bit of a trick of like how much movement, like what movement are we talking about?
We
on
can
the
treat
boat?
this
'Cause-
more like the Google interview question where it's less about
Right.
the answer and more about like what were you thinking? Because actually
Yeah.
you were kind of closer to their answer in your thinking about parts
Right.
of the boat moving with the waves. Like, so if you counted the up and down motion, but then we start entering into this thing of like if you put a GPS tracker on the turbine and a GPS tracker on the tip of the bow? No, stern. What's the front?
The bow.
The bow,
Yeah.
right? So the bow is
Right.
bouncing up and down, but the turbine's turning around and around as it's going forward. And then what are you measuring? Are you measuring the entire length of that line that's being
Right.
traced and arced? Because doesn't that go into the territory of...
Scalar quantities or vector quantities.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
even going to say, what's the problem with like coastal measurements? If
Oh,
you try and measure
yeah.
the diameter or the coast
fractal
of
nature of
Yeah. the more detailed a map you get of
Yeah.
the coast. So if you tried to measure the coast of Australia and say what is the length of the coast of Australia, you'll get all different lengths depending on
the fidelity of
if you went all the way down with a number wheel and kind of like tried to trace where the water is lapping against the edge of the land or something like that, it's going to be such a circuitous, like jagged.
There is an
kind of path.
excellent video by Stand Up Maths, Matt Parker's YouTube channel, Stand Up Maths, called I think if you search like Matt Parker, an area of ambiguity. There's an excellent video on that where he tries to get a good estimate for the land area of a country, and of course, like even though coastline, you can't perfectly define the length of a coastline because, as you said, the higher degree of resolution you go to, it approaches infinity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do that, the actual area trends toward a number. So if as the coastline approaches infinity, I think there is a limit that the area approaches, and so you can get an actual limit quantity, an upper bound for area.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But then if you take it into 3 dimensions and you look at a topographical map and think, well, what's area? Is it just a flat plane, or does it follow the curvature of the thing? And then if you and then the same problem goes up a dimension. So the higher level of resolution you take your measurements of the undulation, your surface area will approach infinity. But if you do that to the volume approaches a limit, and then you can calculate the sort of like the integral underneath.
Yeah. So can you go down a dimension then?
That's a good
then
question.
Get a actual finite limit of the perimeter?
That's a good question.
What would that mean to go down a dimension?
What would it mean? It would be like a point.
A point would have to reach infinity.
A point, yeah.
But what point would you be defining then? It would be
an origin point, maybe, and then.
So if you could define any point on No, not even a point on the perimeter.
Yeah,
Would
I
it be?
don't
That's a
know.
good
If you
question.
could
I
say
can't
with more
picture it.
certainty where any point is on the perimeter, then
It's
you could get to
flatland.
the. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, we come full circle, or full oblong, or full ellipse, or full hexagon, or just add more sides.
Yeah.
It's blowing my brain.
Blow my
Yeah.
brain. Oh, my mind is super stretched.
This is what I come here for.
Yeah.
This is-
Yeah.
I
My
like
mind is
this.
stretched.
I
like
come here
this.
for the tea.
Yeah, well, the tea is lovely as well. What did you go for? in the end?
What did I get? I've
It was
was
lemon,
torn up
ginger,
torn up the thing. It was
Manuka honey, I think.
yes, it was delicious.
Yes, this was chamomile, honey, and vanilla.
I think I had the same as you, Ben.
Yeah, it's nice.
Birds
It's
of a
just very
feather.
calming, very warming. So, I had a bunch of thoughts going through my head then. So, that's right. So by their logic, the propeller is part of the boat, part of the ship.
Right.
What's the difference between a ship and a boat, by the way, Mr. Nautical? Mr.
There is a great definition of this. I heard it was because it's not very well defined.
A ship sails and works.
Mm.
A boat
Mm.
sails but doesn't work.
Mm.
And a tramp. No, I don't know. Sorry, I went
Wow, that's a callback.
Just goes from there on.
Yeah.
That's got me right
no
at the end
recognition.
there.
We're only 6 episodes in.
Yeah,
We lost track of our
I wish I
callbacks.
could remember. It was a funny like non-definition because I don't think there's a real like if you call it, it's whatever the. No, I can't remember. I'll try and remember to ask my brother about that and get back to you next
But
time.
it sounds like something that they'd teasingly say to one another.
Yeah. I think if you are in the Navy, if you start calling things boats, they get a bit upset. They're ships.
Sure.
In
But,
the Navy.
But then you get to a certain limit and you can't really call it.
And in Canada,
Best to just say vessel.
in Canada, a ship is a boat this big.
It's a boat this big.
A boat is a boat this big.
Right. So I get what you're saying there, Ben. Like what constitutes a part of the boat?
'Cause,
And then
like-
its rotational distance traveled has nothing to. It could be stationary. The boat could be stationary, and the propellers could just be going. And
Yeah.
over the amount of time taken,
has the
it will
propeller
travel more than any
traveled?
part of the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like a screw, like a bolt could just come. What's the difference between a screw and a bolt? No. A screw could come loose
Call them screws.
on the deck of the QE2 and it rolls from the bow to the stern and back again for every length of the ship moving forward.
And
Then
one
that screw
point
has
on
traveled.
that screw.
So that screw will have
Yeah.
traveled double the distance.
And if you describe that curve on a line,
and a screw on the upper deck will have gone slightly further because it's on the upper,
there
like
you go, yeah.
So if there was a turbine on the top of the what's it the tube thing?
Yeah.
What's
The
it
chimney?
called? The chimney. If there was a turbine at the top of that spinning,
Yeah,
then
that's
that
right.
one is spinning further than the one at the back of the boat, or it's gone a further distance.
What if one of the lifeboats just gets lowered and falls off and then just goes drifting and just drifts and it like eventually just washes up on shore?
And if
It's like, that would've gone
if
further.
the cleaners are using a Dyson, and the
Oh,
engines
that's
in those,
fast.
the turbines in those things are like super, like
following
tens
the
of thousands of
screw
RPM.
thread as well. Oh, there's another pun. But following the thread of this screw, like if the screw like falls overboard and then gosh, because the ship of Theseus. The idea of like if you just keep replacing parts of the ship, then is it still the same ship?
Yeah,
Like,
when
so
does
if
it
this
become-
turbine
yeah.
gets taken off halfway and gets like scrap metal gets used as part of a rocket. The rocket gets sent into space and then splashes down and then gets reclaimed by a trawler ship, but ends up in the same harbor. These guys don't know what they're talking about.
So, look, I'm not having a go at them, but
but
yes, I feel like you could take that one in a few different directions.
The ship of Theseus makes me think, is it the Irish joke about Farmer O'Brien's had the same shovel for 20 years?
Yeah,
He's only
yeah,
replaced
yeah.
the head 5 times and the handle 10 times.
Yeah. So good. There was an extra level to that. So like, because am I getting this right? Do you want to? If the listener hasn't heard, is the ship of Theseus?
The ship of Theseus is this idea of if a ship, this is what is a thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What is this ship? The ship is all the bits of wood, all the screws, all the sails, the mast, all combined together makes this object, the ship.
Yeah.
Right? This plank is a plank, but it's part of this ship. But then the
You
ship
give it a
starts to
name
fall
as well,
apart.
which helps to
Yeah,
invoke
and this is
a-
this ship, the ship of Theseus, not that ship, the ship of Odysseus or whatever, or the QE2, right?
Yeah.
The ship of Theseus is this ship. It is this constitution of planks and sails and masts and screws and bolts and da. But the planks start to rot over time, so you replace this one plank. But it's still the same ship, right?
Yeah,
It's still
yeah.
the ship of Theseus. We've replaced a plank on that ship. And then another plank goes, and another plank goes. And eventually you've replaced every plank with a new plank. And then the mast rots, and so you've replaced the mast, and the sails get holes in them, so you replace the sails, you replace all the ropes because they've gone. So eventually you've replaced every single part. Is it still the ship of Theseus, right? Because what is the thing? It's the component, it's the association of all these parts together.
Yeah.
And then it's now you don't just, those parts don't rot. You take a plank off and it's still perfectly fine. You put it over here and you put a new plank on. That's the ship of Theseus. Take another plank off and put it over here. But then with those bits you're pulling off, you start making a new ship.
Yeah.
Until you've taken every part of the ship of Theseus off, built a whole new ship with all and only those parts over here. Which one is now the ship of Theseus? Right? Which one do you? And so it's
I was
like,
familiar with the original as a thought experiment, but I did hear. I was hoping you'd get to that because I did hear that only more recently. There was a thing about a guy in a museum. I think it was just another thought experiment who slowly, like, they'd put it in the museum or something, and this museum worker had slowly started taking pieces off and replacing them, and then had gone. I don't know if it's just a thought experiment or it was based on something. And then he like wrote a letter saying, "Well, I've actually got the real one," or something because I dug that extra level on the same sort of like a conundrum. Yeah.
Because that's interesting as well. I mean, yeah, you could. I feel like I'm back in first year uni or like philosophy classes, but like, yeah, you can ask the question at more points as well. Like, at what point did it become the ship of Theseus initially?
Yeah.
And then, when you hear, I'm not sure exactly how true this is, but the how long it takes for all the cells in your body to sort of recycle or to like 7 years
come
or something. And you have all new cells. Yeah. But you can imagine something to that effect. And you're like, you still you. And then, but that's an interesting one to me because that makes it a bit more clear to me. It's like, well, the identity is an emergent property of the components because I am a different person to who I was, 10 years ago or whatever. And the ship probably has gone through a lot of changes. And it's like whatever you imbue it with, that spirit is sort of like, is one way to shortcut that.
And I don't know much about quantum physics, but aren't particles zipping in and out of this plane of reality anyway and going somewhere else for a bit and then coming back and then all sorts
Did we talk about this on the pod about that Lawrence Krauss talk that you and I went to years ago in Melbourne? So Lawrence Krauss gave a talk called A Universe from Nothing.
You're right.
I think his book had just come out or was about to come out called A Universe from Nothing. And I'm going to really butcher this, but my really naive takeaway was that you've got to rethink the meaning of the word nothing.
Right.
But what you could mean by the word nothing has to be interrogated from an astrophysics and a particle physics point of view, because you sort of start by thinking, well, what do we mean by nothing? Okay, well, what do we mean by something? Okay, well, you got all this matter and all this energy and stuff. So you take away all the matter and then you've got like a vacuum, right? So is that nothing? Well, no, because there could still be like, if it's on Earth, like that vacuum could still have like radio waves and other things going through it or whatever. Okay, so out in space, like, where there's no matter, can you get far enough away from anything where there's no radio waves or no wave particle action or anything like that? And then, but what about like the gravitational manifold or something like that? So, okay, like let's hypothetically in our mind, like remove that as well. Remove all these things we can describe as being something, and keep trying to remove all the somethings, right?
Yeah.
And now, like, well, what about I don't know, can you go even further? Like dark matter, dark energy, anything else that we can possibly detect anywhere in the universe? Let's try and remove that hypothetically from this and make this void of nothingness in our mind. He's saying the nature now of what we know about stochastic and like statistical probabilistic, particle occurrence, where you can have like a particle and an antiparticle, or a what do you call it when it's energy? Like a
photon or
yeah, but like what's the anti? not a particle, but like maybe it's just still what you
I
call it.
can't
But
think of it,
let's for the sake of argument, like
yeah,
a particle and an antiparticle can spontaneously come into existence. Is how I would describe. This is all like I'm saying, butchering it, but like there is always a probability, no matter how small, but non-zero, that a particle and an antiparticle can pop into existence.
Yeah.
And generally, this is happening all the time, but they pop into existence and then they reattract each other and re-annihilate each other. So that when that equivalent, so from nothing, like what we would intuitively think is violating thermodynamics, where there's no energy in and no energy out, and so you've got this sort of field or whatever you want to call it, in which particles can come into existence.
Yeah.
And we don't notice it, or it doesn't have enough of an impact on the universe because it's so statistically unlikely. And also when they do come into existence, they've got the right, they've got an energy threshold that means that they don't ever escape each other's pull or orbit or you know, they don't do anything apart from just re-annihilating each other.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that's happening. That can happen all the time on a cosmic time and space scale, right? So then he's taking us back to this idea of like before the Big Bang, whatever that means. Like if you reverse time back and try and like think about whatever that means, the moment, like you said, you can have something preceding the universe that is a statistical likelihood of the particle and antiparticle coming into existence. And he said there is an even smaller subset of that probability that they do come into existence with enough energy that they escape each other. Right. And now you've just got particle and antiparticle.
Yeah.
The equilibrium still exists because the total energy and matter in that closed system, if you want to call it that, is still even because they balance each other out. That whatever properties one has are balanced out by the anti-properties of the other, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
And yet they can suddenly happen, and then that can happen again, and then you could basically the this is where I'm going to have to defer to you in a second, Tom, because I'm reaching really the limits of my memory and my understanding of this anyway. Like he was able to explain it in such a way that kind of said, look, there is no nothing. If you're going to talk about nothing, what nothing means is a statistical field, like a statistical possibility of something.
Right.
And you can't remove that statistical field.
Yeah.
At least like to do that, you'd have to rethink what you think nothing means.
And this is a bit like what we were talking about last week in terms of cutting things, cleaving things,
right,
getting down small enough and having to rethink what it means. At some point, that question, you either need to do away with it or be more rigorous about what you intend to ask, like what you want to know from it. And it's frustrating when you've got an idea of an intuition about what cutting something means, and you've got an intuition about what nothing means, like it's like the absence of things. And it's like, well, maybe maybe that is not a phenomenon that exists as just as absolutely as we just assume it does.
It's like trying to retell a dream, which I've said once before on the podcast, but because it's like it made sense at the time, and I can't quite explain to you now. But he made it make so much sense. Yeah. What really impressed me though was that he rocked up and he said something along the lines of, "I had this other talk I was going to give, but then I've just come off the back of this research project. We've just figured out some new stuff. So I'm going to try and explain to you this new stuff that we've just figured out because it kind of contradicts what it was in my old talk."
Yeah,
so I have to So he was like explaining
stuff
on the go. And I was like, what? Yeah. And then we went to the dinner afterwards and got righteously drunk and went up and I was talking to Lawrence Krauss and tried to say something along the lines of, "Oh, it was so good." I have no memory of what happened that night. That was a wild night, but yeah. Got to talk to got to shake like Jeffrey Robertson's hand. That was really cool. And saw Lawrence Krauss. Who else did we?
It was a fun night out amongst some Grayling.
Oh, Asa Grayling was it was
there's some thinkers there.
Very intelligent group of people, and then
us.
Then a very drunk Ben and a still very but less drunk Tom.
Yeah.
Bumbling our way through to our. Well, no, I was going to say there's nothing really that defends it. We were thinking we were at the gala dinner thing where all the guests were, and they were kind of being swamped by other nerds. And I say that with love because we were definitely part of that nerd crowd. But we were thinking, look, we're not going to try and go and talk. We'll just enjoy this, amazing wine that they're pouring for everyone. And then oh man, they just kept, it's a catered event. They just keep topping up your glasses.
Our courage did grow.
Next thing you know, let's just go. Jeffrey Robinson. Yeah. Oh, God, I'm going to go talk to Jeffrey Robinson. AC Grayling. Oh, my gosh.
Ben and Tom. It's us.
Richard Dawkins. God, Richard Dawkins. Amazing.
Amazing.
Those were the days.
All right. Cup of tea time?
Yeah.
Ooh, I'd go a cup of tea. A second tea.
Oh, tea roulette. What did I get again? Chamomile, honey, vanilla.
Yeah. Did I go the same? Did you get the same for me? Did I say thank you when you handed me the cup?
I think you did.
Well, thank you again.
And I've changed. I've gone cranberry and pomegranate. So I've gone into the berry side of things.
I've got to get back to that. I reckon I shied away from the red teas. I think I had like a one like a long time ago. Or maybe it's just, maybe my brain is so convinced that's going to be like Ribena or red cordial.
It looks like it.
And then
Ribena.
I just like, there's that disconnect. You know that weird feeling when you like go to sip a drink and you think it's going to be Coke, but it's like a milky drink, or you think it's going to be like a fizzy cola, but it's like a thick,
cognitive
creamy.
They've started to put more things in like cans nowadays, so I think I'm used to it now. But they've got like these espresso or like latte drinks in like aluminium cans in servo in the fridge. And
like milky.
I can't describe to you the first time that you have like a milky iced coffee drink out of an aluminium can, and when you open it and it doesn't do the fizz, it just kind of has a ripping, like a aluminium ripping. That would be amazing.
Just a sad sigh.
But yeah, drinking like you're expecting the fizz and then it's not. Sometimes some juices like I had an iced tea in one of those, and it's not carbonated or anything. So it's kind of like there's something disconcerting about opening an aluminium can and it not making the noise. And
Orange
it just kind
juice
of like,
in a can would have to not be great. Wouldn't that be like the thing of getting like juice on your fillings, like your metal fillings or something? Like,
God, like metallic. Like,
chewing on aluminium foil. Or...
No thanks.
And welcome back to the show.
Oh, man, aluminium cans though. Have you ever watched any that engineer guy, or the engineer guy is his? He hasn't done anything huge he hasn't been super active on his channel lately, but he's got this really, really soothing American Canadian accent. Sorry, the engineer guy, if I inappropriately nationalized you, but he does this incredibly in-depth videos on. He does this stuff on the Titanic and the film projector. He did like the film camera, cool. And the shutter, and he has the best animations in there. He's just this sweet older guy, and he does this thing on the incredible engineering of the aluminium drink can.
Right? Yeah,
because
they're very particular shape.
There's so many things about it. That because the pressure is just so, and it's got to be thing. In fact, in order to push the, it used to be like that you would pierce it with a can opener.
Yeah, those old school.
And there would be one that would cut a triangle, and then one that would just make a little indentation for the air. And then that wasn't good enough, and so they had these ring pulls that you'd actually pull the lid off. Mm-hmm. But then that was a rubbish problem. So how do they make something that opens that all stays on the can and can go together? But the thing is, because of the pressure in the can, there's no, and this is just one element of the video, the opening mechanism. He talks about the manufacturing of it, the spray that they put in the inside, this food safe spray that doesn't leach chemicals or anything like that, and the shape of it and how it's all one piece until the top.
Yep.
And the one piece and the cup, the sort of like concave area in the bottom is for strength and stuff because it's all under a lot of pressure and for shipping and all that. But the opening, you wouldn't be able to press in. Like you think about the action that you do to lever that little ring pull into the can and push that perforated bit into the can. You wouldn't be able to do that. There's too much pressure.
Yeah.
So it's two levers.
Okay.
The actual ring pull is, I can't remember which class level, whether it's a class 1 lever or a class 2 level. So you've got a class, I think there might be the other way around, but I think a class 1 lever is like a seesaw. So you've got the load is on the opposite side of the fulcrum to the work being done.
Yep.
Okay.
And so that's your seesaw. But then there's a class 2, I think, lever, might be the other way around. Or there could be one of them, could be class 3, is a wheelbarrow where the load is, it goes fulcrum, and then the load is between the work being done and the fulcrum.
Yep.
Sure.
But that's still mechanical advantage.
Or if your friend gets up off the seesaw, walks across the beam, and is on your side of the seesaw with you.
With
and
you.
is bouncing
And
up
there's a
down.
wheelbarrow on the other end.
I need it all in seesaw terms for my brain to
Oh,
understand.
sure.
Yep.
Gotcha. But so to begin with, it's a class wheelbarrow lever
Right.
that pulls up
Yeah.
the actual pin,
Yep.
the actual rivet that keeps the ring pull on the top of the can,
Which you can swivel around.
which you can swivel it around, the little rivet that keeps it on there. The first action, pulling it up, actually shears a little bit and breaks the seal and allows.
I did not know.
And so it's like it's like a wheelbarrow thing, because the fulcrum is at the very end of the ring pull over the part that eventually goes
So
into
that
the
lets
can,
some air in.
and then the load is the rivet, and then the work being done is on the far side of the ring pull, and it breaks the seal, and that's the first.
Okay.
And then, of course, you're just pushing against the can. You're not pushing against the pressure anymore.
Okay.
And the same lever becomes a class seesaw lever that then you're pulling up, and it pushes the actual pre-cut area down.
Now, can you make
And it's
that
just-
noise? Because you made
Yeah. The first one.
nice.
Or something
Yeah,
like
That was
that.
good.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
That was good.
Yeah.
It's
So-
just a little bit of
Sorry,
a-
rewinding a bit. So you're saying it the first part it sort of scrapes along to shear it, or what? How's
Sounds
that?
like a
shaped?
pin is
no,
getting
it
pulled
pulls.
like a grenade
It
pin
pulls
is like
the
coming
so there's like a
It
little
pulls it
rivet.
out.
There's a little round rivet that holds that you end up swiveling it. It's the the
Yeah.
axle that you end up swiveling the thing on if you're playing with it later, which I always do.
Oh, that pulls up.
That pulls up,
Like
and
out.
it actually there's a without yanking out completely.
Yeah.
I believe there
Just
is a
Which
part
I've
of
done.
enough of it.
which I've done too many times.
Uh.
Is there is a part of that action that breaks the seal before you've even started to tear down into the top of the can.
So if
Yeah,
you
right.
wanted to do a really obscure and kind of annoying protest, you could go through and just in the shops kind of just do that motion.
Yeah, you could. Yep.
And it wouldn't puncture
it
the
wouldn't-
actual.
Yeah, it might leak a little bit.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen where it goes tss, and then the ring pull comes off? Has that happened
But
to
you
you?
get-
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah,
frothing
yeah.
and
And
stuff.
so I've had it so that the first lever works.
The ring came off my
And-
pudding can.
Take my penknife, my good man. I was gonna quote Chief Wiggum earlier when you were talking about when you're out there, and you got to get rid of stuff and was it the electromagnetic spectrum and then the gravitational manifold? I was going, oh, nothing gets gravitational manifold out. See?
I could picture everything you were talking about. You gave such a good explanation, and I even looked away because you were doing such good gestures of everything.
thank
like
you.
Your hands went down for the wheelbarrow. I was like, oh, a wheelbarrow, right?
Yeah.
And then I just got really sad thinking all our listeners with like aphantasia listening to this, thinking
and they can't even.
they're not going to be able to picture
they don't-
any of
yeah.
this. How are they
Yeah.
going to? Can you like imagine what the ring pull is and all these different components of
They need to
What?
watch the engineer guy. The
Exactly.
videos are right there on screen.
yeah?
Am I right in thinking that modern pull tab on the cans was an Australian
Ooh.
Australian invented
That's
that,
good.
but then it was like kind of
I
taken
don't
as
know.
bought by Coke or something.
Pre-Google, you could just have said that, and that would
Yeah.
be something that I'd believe. It'd be like, yeah, the ring pull on a can, like
Mhm.
because what have we got? We've got the Hills hoist,
Mm-hmm.
the
Cordless drill. Did I make that up?
really
Did I make that up?
again.
It's
It
either-
sounds good.
it's either-
I'd be like, yeah,
It's either Australian, Irish, or invented by a woman. It's one of those things. There was like, hey, these inventions were, and somebody claimed them. I can't remember if it was the Irish, the women, or the Australians.
yeah, but something weird anyway. Yeah,
Something you wouldn't expect. No, that's all. That's dumb. But yeah, something special.
The Irish cordless drill is just
The goon bag?
yeah.
Sorry, you were gonna do a thing.
No, it wasn't going to be great. It's just going to be racist. And I was probably spending too long figuring out how to make this racist joke. No, I was just thinking the cordless drill in Ireland is just the electric drill with the cords just falling off.
Yeah.
The goon bag. And then Wheel of Goon Fortune? Where you hang your goon bags to the hills hoist. That is
doubling down on the Aussie inventions. And Wheels Hoist, South Australian, I believe.
Ooh, even better.
I think.
There you go.
Does that make sense?
Again, I'm not fact-checking anything you guys are saying. And I reckon you're complete BS all. It sounds good to me. I'm going to put it out there. And look, we've got a microphone. We've got a megaphone to the world now. So
people are listening to this on a device that can, make or break any of these facts. And just remember, this is what life used to be like. This is what it was in primary school. You could just say whatever you wanted.
Oh, exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, in the playground, it'd just be like,
this is just what it was. Sitting there on the seesaw.
Yeah,
thinking we invented this.
Cordless drills were invented by the same Irish woman that invented the hills hoist.
Okay, here's something though for the South Aussies or the Australians to do with pull tabs is the Bundaberg's style pull tabs.
I've got my method.
Yeah, you've got
they're tricky.
Yeah, the cap sort of covers the whole top of the bottle, and these are glass bottles with sort of a pull tab thing, but there's a cap with a ring where you sort of. I think the idea is that you would pull the ring up. It's sort of stuck to the side of the glass. Pull it all the way up with your thumb sort of sitting on top of the cap. And then you pull up and back, or there are maybe a few different methods, and then you get a good little as it comes off the top. Now
my method is to slice the edge of my finger as I'm pulling it up, good method, and just somehow always doing the most unco thing.
And the whole foil bit just comes off.
I used to like pulling because they used to be on Tooheys beer bottles or something that my dad used to get. Tooheys New used to have that, I reckon. And you tear across the top, and then the way it ended up, that looked like a little lobster. You'd kind of pull the little things out. And two little claws.
Oh yeah, right.
And make little lobsters out of them. But they're tricky because there's little resistance, and then getting over that hump, that you could spill it everywhere. So I do it I either really hold it really firmly on the table while I lift it up, and I don't pull it away from myself. I kind of lift it up to that point and then spin it around and pull it toward myself and rest my wrist on the top of the bottle, so it's kind of peeling back. With downward pressure on the bottle.
That would be making your forearm and your wrist into a class 2.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that right?
The wheelbarrow
class
is
becoming the.
Is that right?
Oh no, it's probably class 1 then, isn't it? Because your wrist is sort of the fulcrum.
Yeah, and
your
then the load
fingertips curled down is the.
The load is between the
little kid on the seesaw, and your forearm is pulling back like the big kid on the seesaw.
But sometimes if there's not a table. I just want to minimize rapid movement of the vessel. So I kind of hold it really close to my body and just press it against my body while I do it and try so that throughout the entire episode of it being opened, there's not a point where the bottle can jolt.
Yep. Yeah. It's important to think this. I'm with you. I would love to be one of these cool people that can just effortlessly open bottles and pour drinks and things. But no, it takes a huge amount more planning and forethought when you got our kind of brain.
Yeah.
I'm watching my 4-year-old at the moment, and he's going through that phase that I'd forgotten about, which is when you're not strong enough for a lot of big 2 or 3 liter milk containers when they're really full. So you what looks effortless to adults is just picking it up one-handed and tipping this thing. There's so much concentration, two-handedness, balance, the way that a 3/4 full 3 liter milk, the weight changes and displaces as that thing is tipping and can suddenly turn into
some is coming out as well, and so it's changing.
Yeah, that's right. It's creating one of those Chinese water fountain hammer things where it's the tipping kind of mechanism that suddenly
I still give myself a high five if I can empty a jerry can into a car without it going and like just tiny like jets of petrol going everywhere. If I could do that without making any mess, that's just a sensational day.
Oh, if I can take a sip of a drink without it backsplashing into my face or up my nostrils and just, That's why I've got the moustache now. Just to catch all these kind of drips. I'm just very, messy individual.
I knew it wasn't just for the looks.
And,
Too practical for that.
If you want to grow a moustache, and then surprise people that why don't you?
There's lots of footage on the internet of great moustaches you can grow. Yeah,
you can try it on your friends.
On your friends.
Love you, boys.
Love you, Jeno.
Love hanging out.